Hi friends, Prepared Suburbanite here. It's Saturday, February 10th. And I've been working out here in the shop a little bit, building boxes and shelves and stuff like that for the French Cleat wall. And I've got it to a stage where I really like it. But I think I really owe you some commentary on the happenings of this particular week. So stick around. So as I planned on doing, I got the tools that I use really most frequently, the drill driver, the drills, my cabinets that have got nuts and bolts and screws and washers and all kinds of stuff like that, tape measure, the Craig system there. Up on top is a jigsaw and a hand sander. Chisels, obviously, squares, T-square, and my tape measure. And down here is the case with the Forstner bits. I got some glue. In that box there is the router bits, and a pair of work gloves over there. Over on this side, I did a kind of temporary quick install of a power strip that I've got plugged in there that allows me to get a few things plugged in here. I'm not sure that that's going to be the permanent location for it, but permanent location for the chop saw on wheels, which I can very easily now move around, and I've got plenty of space to move it to. Over here is the table saw, and that's in its place, and it's on casters so that we can move that around. I put the router in the router table up on the old workbench, but I'm pretty much thinking I'm going to mount that to a piece of 3/4 inch or 5/8 inch plywood, and then rig it up so that I can put it on the old workmate there from Black & Decker. I got that as a gift for my father probably 30 or 35 years ago, and when he passed away it kind of transferred itself back to me. So there it is. It's going to be an antique very shortly, just like me. Up on this wall, I decided, at least for now, I'm keeping that pegboard stuff. It just seems to be working out a little bit better for holding the clamps and levels and tools and extra stuff that I got laying around. So that's pretty much it for the shop organization and layout. This week was really quite exciting if you happen to ever watch the news and the newscasts and get all the different opinions. Went from CNN, went from Fox, went from MSNBC. It's been a wild week. Read any good memos lately? If half of that stuff is true, we are in deep trouble. It's my sense that Donald Trump had the thought that when he went to Washington, he was going to drain the swamp. And you know what he's doing right now? He's draining the swamp, because all this stuff now is starting to percolate into the lexicon of what's going on. Now, it depends on who you listen to and what you really believe. Are the facts truly there? I'm not 100% sure that we've seen everything. In an effort to be transparent, the Republicans kind of gave us an outline or an overview of their findings from whatever committee that was that they were dealing with, Nunes memo, and that's their perspective. Right now, being Saturday, the Democratic response to that is being held up because folks are thinking that there was too much being released, so much for transparency, I guess. But when they're talking about methodologies of intelligence gatherings and stuff like that. Maybe they're dropping names that are supposed to be undercover or clandestine operators. That could be an issue, and it could compromise people's lives. So maybe it's a good thing to go back and kind of trim that down just a little bit. But if the Democrats have got a point to make, then let's see what they've got to say from their perspective coming out of that committee. But I'm not sure that anybody can say too much more than what's already been said, other than maybe it's been taken out of context. So we'll see. But honest to goodness, if half of that stuff is true, then we truly have a crisis on our hands. And I'm saying, you know, it's these kind of times, it's these fragile breaches of trust that really want you to, really want me to stop, think, question everything, and make sure that I've got my preparations in order. The second thing that's been going on this week is the stock market. Well, it's just been absolutely crazy. Depending on who you're getting your information from and who you're getting your news from, first it was, oh, they were reacting to the Federal Reserve rumors that interest rates are going to go up now because the economy is starting to percolate a little bit better than it has been in the past. Well, gee, for having a 10-point correction during the week, that interest rate rumor must be pretty nasty. Yeah, there may be some interest rate increases, but I can't believe that that was a single factor, the single factor for what happened in the stock market this week. Two things, and I've heard this said by many wise people, two things drive that market: fear and greed. So whatever's going on, I think it's fear. And it could be coming from a couple of different sources. It could be that breach of trust that the American citizens are beginning to feel with what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now, with all these memos being released and the emails and the leakers and, oh my goodness. But if half of that stuff turns out to be true, then we've really got a crisis on our hands. And as American citizens, we have a responsibility to make sure that it gets corrected. We've got the power of the vote. And I guess it may have been Will Rogers that said, you know, if it was really important, they wouldn't let us vote. Well, I'm thinking that it really is important, and Will Rogers was a great humorist, but I believe that our vote can make a difference. I know it did in 2016 because people turned out and voted for a huge change. And that huge change is going on right now. The one side, they hate it. The other side, they love it. So, I'm not quite sure exactly what's going on, but the power of the vote is there. We have voices, and if you don't like what's going on, make sure that your representatives in both the state and federal government are aware of what you're currently thinking. It may influence how they react to certain things and certain votes that are coming up that are vitally important to the future of this country. I'm concerned. This could be the beginning of a real tailspin in the stock market, in the bond market, in that whole capitalistic, money-making, greed-driven, fear-driven marketplace that's out there. I've got some money invested in there too. And I really hate to look at the balance sheet right now, but it's all on paper. It's not like I had a big box of cash and somebody just came and took it. I don't think that's the way you have to look at this. You take a gamble when you go into the stock market. You roll the dice. whatever numbers come up, that's what you get. It's a gamble. You try to mitigate your risk factors and your exposure to different things and do the best you can. If I was to keep it just in a simple passbook type savings account, I'd be getting maybe 0.75%, maybe a full percent. Woohoo! Yeah, well, at least in the market, I've been averaging much more than that on a year-to-year basis. I think and I hope that this is a temporary kind of a situation, that fear and greed mix together and cause this thing to happen. I don't think it's going to last too long, but we were sorely in need of a market correction. I think folks got way too greedy, and when they get too greedy, then the fear factor kind of kicks in, levels things out, and over time, we end up a little bit better all along. But that doesn't mean you should let your guard down. That doesn't mean you should just stop doing what you're doing and bury your head in the sand. Now is the time to really re-examine all your preparations for whatever could happen. If the market's open on Monday next week and we take another 1,000-point dive, and then the following day another 1,000-point dive, wow. Yeah, it won't be just a simple correction. It'll be another depression that's gonna be triggered. And if you're not ready for a depression, if you're not ready for a lengthy recession, which it could be, you've got to have your preparation plans in order. Is your income going to be okay? Do you have food to get by? Things are going to get tight. Do you have a way to deal with water purification, your water sources? Do you have multiple and redundant backup systems? Do you have enough food to get you through if the transportation systems start to fail? You got to be thinking about those things. In times like this, where you've got multiple issues that seem to be disparate, you've got the nonsense going on in Washington, D.C. with the memos being released and the accusations of spying and Russian collusion and finger pointing and accusations and people resigning and the sexual overtones and sexual you name it, all that stuff, that's the swamp. That's the stuff that we as American citizens have to make sure gets cleaned out. I'm hoping that Donald Trump is the guy that's going to do that, but I'm afraid he's not going to be able to get it all done by himself. I don't think the Republicans are with him after the vote to extend the debt ceiling and expand the debt ceiling for the next 2 years. I think the Republicans and the conservatives in the Republican Party basically did sell their souls to the devil by voting to increase the debt. That's not what we should be doing. Two things that have to happen. Taxes have to go down, and the Trump's tax reform legislation, it's just gone into effect now in February. Folks are going to start seeing a little bit more income, a little less taxes taken out, at least on the federal side, and that's going to generate some activity in the economy. It's going to eventually, it could reduce the revenues that go into the federal government, at least on a per capita basis, maybe not overall. If more and more people start working and paying taxes that weren't working and weren't paying taxes before, the general revenues may actually go up a little, but that's all speculation and it's all theory. But two things really had to happen. Tax reform needed to make sure that the tax rates went down, and that spending also has to go down, and the federal spending is not going down. I don't know where your priorities are But when I look at my personal budget and been in the accounting field pretty much all my life, I know that when you have a period of time where your revenues or where your expenses exceed your revenues, you're in a downward spiral. You're going to be borrowing money to make ends meet. Well, that's exactly what the federal government's doing right now, is borrowing $1 million a minute to keep the government running. And nobody's been strong enough in Washington. Nobody's had the right message. Maybe Rand Paul is out there tweeting every once in a while and getting the word out that, hey, this is not the way you run things. But he's the only voice that's out there, and he's been lambasted by both the right and the left for closing down the government for 3 or 4 hours during the week. It's been a crazy week, that's for sure. Spending has to be under control. We've got to really, really examine foreign policy, domestic policy, infrastructure spending, defense spending, social welfare spending, on how we do this kind of stuff. We can't just continue to print money. It doesn't work, and it's not going to work. And if you combine that factor, that the increasing levels of debt and the national debt, as long as it continues to rise and we continue to print more money, there's going to eventually be inflation, and there's going to be much higher interest rates, and the market doesn't like high interest rates. It doesn't like turmoil in Washington, D.C. It doesn't like unbalanced budgets. It doesn't like political brinksmanship. So when all that stuff starts happening simultaneously, the markets react negatively. That's where we are right now. Be prepared. Look at your plans, re-examine. Get prepared for a recession, get prepared for a depression, and get prepared for some kind of really big change in Washington, D.C. It's coming. I really do believe indictments are going to be happening within the next 6 months or so, and I'm not sure who's going to get indicted. This is the Prepared Suburbanite, reminding you to be prepared always, and I'll see you on the next video.